Right now, somewhere in the United States, someone is holding a passport that could be taken away from them, and they have no idea. They are planning vacations, booking flights, dreaming about their next international adventure, completely unaware that a single decision, a forgotten obligation, or a misunderstanding could leave them stranded. And here's the part that should concern you. That person might be you. Before you click away thinking this is just another fear-mongering video designed to scare you into watching until the end, let me be completely honest with you. My goal today is not to create panic. My goal is to hand you something far more valuable than fear. I want to give you awareness. Because when you understand exactly how passport revocation works, when you know the specific triggers that can put your travel documents at risk, you stop being vulnerable and you start being prepared. There is a massive difference between walking through life hoping nothing bad happens and walking through life knowing exactly what to avoid. Today, I am going to show you 5 legitimate reasons why the United States government can revoke your passport. And some of these are going to surprise you, but more importantly, I'm going to explain how each situation actually works, who is truly at risk, and what you can do to protect yourself. Because knowledge without action is useless, and fear without understanding is paralyzing. Neither of those serves you. Let me start by addressing something that most people get completely wrong. There is a common belief that once you have a United States passport, it belongs to you forever. You earned it, you paid for it, you waited in line for it, it has your name on it, your photo inside, and it sits in your drawer, ready to take you anywhere in the world. But here is the truth that very few people talk about openly. Your passport is not actually yours. Legally speaking, your passport is the property of the United States government. They issue it to you. They allow you to use it, and under specific circumstances, they have the legal authority to take it back. Now, before your heart starts racing, I need you to understand something critical. The government does not revoke passports casually. They do not wake up in the morning looking for reasons to cancel your travel documents. These revocations happen for specific documented reasons, and in most cases, they involve situations that the average law-abiding person will never encounter. But here's why you still need to watch this video carefully. Some of the reasons on this list are not as obvious as you might think. Some of them catch people completely off guard, and at least one of them affects millions of Americans who have no idea they are even at risk. Think about what your passport represents for a moment. It is not just a booklet with stamps. It is your ticket to freedom of movement. It is your ability to visit family overseas, to take business trips, to experience the world, to escape if you ever needed to. When that document gets revoked, doors close, opportunities vanish, and in some cases, you can find yourself trapped in a situation you never anticipated. That is why understanding these 5 reasons matters so much. Not because you should live in fear, but because you deserve to live with clarity. So let us begin with the first reason, and I am starting here because it catches more people by surprise than almost anything else on this list. The first disturbing reason your passport can be revoked has nothing to do with criminal activity, nothing to do with national security, and nothing to do with fraud. It comes down to money. Specifically, it comes down to debt. If you owe the Internal Revenue Service more than $55,000 in seriously delinquent tax debt, the State Department has the authority to deny your passport application or revoke your existing passport. This is not a rumor. This is not speculation. This is federal law, and it has been actively enforced since 2018. The IRS certifies your debt to the State Department, and once that certification happens, your passport privileges are in jeopardy. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. $55,000 is a lot of money. That does not apply to me. But here is where it gets more complicated than most people realize. That $55,000 threshold includes penalties and interest, not just the original tax amount. If you owed $20,000 $10 years ago, and you have been ignoring it, that debt has been growing. Interest compounds. Penalties stack, and before you know it, you have crossed a threshold you never expected to reach. The good news is that this does not happen without warning. The IRS is required to notify you before certifying your debt to the State Department. You receive notices, you have opportunities to respond, you can set up payment plans, you can dispute the debt if you believe it is incorrect. You can apply for currently not collectible status if you are facing genuine financial hardship. The system is not designed to trap you overnight. But here is the problem. People ignore IRS notices. They throw them in a drawer. They convince themselves they will deal with it later. And then one day they apply for a passport renewal before an international trip, and they discover that their application has been denied, or worse, they are already overseas. And when they try to renew their passport at an embassy, they learn that their travel document is no longer valid. This is why awareness matters. If you have any outstanding tax issues, any unresolved disputes with the IRS, any payment plans that you have fallen behind on, now is the time to address them. Not because you should panic, but because you should never be blindsided by something you could have prevented. The first reason is about money. The second reason is about something far more personal, and it affects millions of American parents in ways they never expected. The second reason your passport can be revoked involves one of the most emotionally charged areas of American law, and it affects far more people than the tax debt issue we just discussed. If you owe more than $2,500 in child support, your passport can be denied or revoked. Read that number again. $2,500, not $55,000 like the tax threshold, just $2,500. That is a fraction of what many parents pay in a single year of support obligations. That is a number that someone could fall behind on after just a few difficult months. And yet crossing that threshold puts your passport directly at risk. Here is how the system works. State child support enforcement agencies report delinquent parents to the Federal Office of Child Support Enforcement. That federal office then transmits the information to the State Department. Once your name is in that system, your passport application will be denied. If you already have a passport and you are flagged, your existing passport can be revoked. This is not a theoretical possibility. This is an active enforcement mechanism that affects tens of thousands of Americans every single year. And unlike the tax debt situation, there is no complex calculation required. The threshold is simple and absolute. If you owe more than $2,500 in child support or RARs, you are at risk. Now, I want to pause here and acknowledge something important. Child support exists for a reason. Children deserve financial support from both parents. The enforcement mechanisms exist because too many parents have historically abandoned their financial responsibilities and children have suffered as a result. I am not here to debate whether child support enforcement is fair or unfair. I am here to make sure you understand how the system works so you are never caught off guard. Because here is what happens in the real world. Circumstances change, people lose jobs, medical emergencies happen, businesses fail, and suddenly, someone who has been faithfully paying child support for years finds themselves unable to keep up. They fall behind by 1 month, then 2, then 3. They intend to catch up. They plan to make it right, but life keeps throwing obstacles in their path. And before they realize how serious the situation has become, they have crossed that $2,500 threshold. The first time many people discover they have a passport problem is when they try to travel. Maybe they booked a cruise for their honeymoon with their new spouse. Maybe they have a business trip that could change their career. Maybe a family member overseas is sick and they need to get there quickly. They go to renew their passport expecting a routine process, and instead they receive a denial, or they arrive at the airport and they discover their passport has been flagged. In that moment, everything changes. The trip is ruined. The opportunity is lost. The family emergency becomes even more tragic because they cannot be there. If you are currently behind on child support, I need you to understand that this is not something that will simply go away. The enforcement agencies are connected, the databases are updated, and passport revocation is just one of many consequences you might face. Your driver's license can be suspended, your professional licenses can be affected, your wages can be garnished. The system is designed to create pressure from multiple directions until you address the obligation, but here's the path forward. Contact your state child support enforcement agency, explain your situation. If you have experienced a genuine change in circumstances, you may be able to request a modification of your support order. If you are behind but working to catch up, you can often establish a payment plan that will prevent further enforcement actions. The key is communication. The worst thing you can do is ignore the problem and hope it disappears. It will not disappear. It will only get worse. Let me transition now to the third reason your passport can be revoked. And this one takes us into much darker territory. We have talked about money, we have talked about family obligations. Now we need to talk about something that most people assume could never apply to them: criminal activity. Specifically, certain federal criminal convictions can result in passport revocation or denial. And while you might think this only applies to hardened criminals and international fugitives, the reality is more nuanced than you expect. If you are convicted of international drug trafficking, federal law mandates passport revocation. This is not discretionary, this is automatic. Your passport will be revoked, and you will be ineligible to receive a new one for a significant period of time. But drug trafficking is not the only criminal activity that can affect your passport status. If you are convicted of certain sex offenses, particularly those involving minors, your passport will be marked with a special identifier, and in some cases your travel may be restricted or your passport revoked entirely. If you use your passport in connection with any federal crime, that document can be seized as evidence and potentially revoked as part of your sentence. Here is where it gets complicated for ordinary people. If you have an outstanding federal warrant, you will not be issued a passport. If you are on probation or parole with travel restrictions, attempting to obtain or use a passport could violate the terms of your supervision and create additional legal problems. And if you are under federal indictment, even before conviction, the government may move to revoke your passport to prevent flight risk. Now, I recognize that most people watching this video have never been arrested, never been indicted, and never been convicted of any crime. If that describes you, this particular reason probably does not apply to your life. But I include it here because understanding the full scope of passport revocation helps you appreciate how seriously the government takes this document. Your passport is not just identification. It is not just a travel convenience. It represents your ability to cross international borders, and the government guards that ability carefully. When someone demonstrates through criminal behavior that they pose a risk to national security, to international law enforcement cooperation, or to vulnerable populations in other countries, the privilege of passport ownership can be withdrawn. This is the system working as designed. But it also means that if you ever find yourself in legal trouble, one of the many things at stake is your ability to travel freely. This brings us to the fourth reason, and this is where we move from individual choices to something that feels much larger and more frightening. The fourth reason your passport can be revoked deals with national security. And this is the category that generates the most fear and the most misunderstanding. Under federal law, the Secretary of State has broad authority to deny or revoke a passport if the applicant's activities abroad would cause serious damage to national security or foreign policy. This sounds vague because it is intentionally vague. It gives the government flexibility to respond to genuine threats. But that flexibility also creates uncertainty for ordinary citizens who wonder whether their political views, their travel history, or their associations could put them at risk. Let me be direct with you about what this actually means in practice. The national security revocation power is primarily used against individuals who have joined or provided material support to designated terrorist organizations. If someone travels overseas to fight with a foreign terrorist group, their passport can be revoked. If someone provides financial support, logistical assistance, or recruitment services to organizations that the United States has designated as terrorist entities, their passport is at risk. These are not ambiguous cases. These are situations involving direct documented connections to organizations that pose genuine threats to American lives and interests. But here is where the fear often exceeds the reality. Simply traveling to certain countries does not automatically trigger passport revocation. Having friends or family members in regions associated with conflict does not put your passport at risk. Expressing political opinions that are critical of American foreign policy does not make you a target. Practicing a particular religion, belonging to a particular ethnic group, or maintaining cultural connections to your ancestral homeland does not create passport problems. The National Security Revocation Authority is powerful, but it is not arbitrary. It requires evidence. It requires process, and it is subject to legal challenge. If you have ever worried that your travel patterns, your social media posts, or your personal beliefs might somehow put your passport at risk, I want to offer you some reassurance. The government is not monitoring ordinary citizens looking for reasons to revoke their travel documents. They are focused on genuine threats on individuals who have demonstrated through their actions that they pose a danger to national security. The vast majority of Americans will never come anywhere close to triggering national security concerns. You can travel the world, maintain international friendships, express your political views, and live your life without fear that the State Department is watching and waiting to cancel your passport. However, I include this reason because you deserve to know it exists. You deserve to understand that passport ownership is not an absolute right immune from all government oversight. And you deserve to know that if you ever become aware of someone actively supporting terrorist organizations, that person is not just committing a federal crime. They are also putting their ability to travel at permanent risk. The consequences extend far beyond prison sentences. They touch every aspect of freedom and mobility. Now we arrive at the fifth and final reason your passport can be revoked. And in many ways, this is the reason that hits closest to home for the largest number of people. Fraud. If you obtained your passport through fraud, misrepresentation, or false statements, that passport can be revoked at any time, and you can face criminal prosecution on top of the revocation. This sounds straightforward, but the implications are broader than many people realize. What constitutes fraud in the passport application process? The obvious examples include using a fake identity, submitting forged documents, or claiming citizenship you do not actually possess. These are clear cases of fraud that result in immediate revocation and criminal charges. But fraud can also include more subtle misrepresentations. If you lied about your name, your date of birth, your place of birth, or your criminal history on your passport application, you committed fraud. If you used someone else's birth certificate, social security number, or identity documents, you committed fraud. If you failed to disclose information that would have resulted in denial and that failure was intentional, you committed fraud. Here is where this becomes personally relevant to more people than you might expect. Some individuals who immigrated to the United States years or even decades ago used false documents during their initial entry or during the immigration process. They may have later obtained legitimate status, perhaps through marriage to a citizen, through amnesty programs, or through other pathways. They may have eventually naturalized and obtained United States passports, but if their original entry or their path to citizenship involved fraud, that passport remains vulnerable. The government can look back. There is no statute of limitations on passport fraud. And when fraud is discovered, everything built on that fraudulent foundation can collapse. I want to be careful here because I am not trying to frighten people who made desperate decisions in desperate circumstances. I understand that immigration history is complicated. I understand that people fleeing poverty, violence, or persecution sometimes felt they had no choice but to use whatever documents they could obtain. I am not here to judge those decisions, but I am here to tell you the truth about legal consequences. If fraud exists in your history, it creates ongoing risk. That risk may never materialize. Many people live their entire lives without their historical fraud being discovered, but the risk exists, and pretending it does not exist does not make you safer. If you are concerned about potential fraud in your immigration history or your passport application, the best course of action is to consult with a qualified immigration attorney. They can evaluate your specific situation, explain the potential risks, and advise you on whether any remedial steps are available. Sometimes there are legal pathways to address historical problems. Sometimes the best course is simply to understand your risk level and make informed decisions about travel and document renewal. What you should never do is apply for a new passport using the same fraudulent information that created the original problem that compounds the fraud and creates additional criminal exposure. We have now covered all 5 disturbing reasons your passport can be revoked: tax debt above $55,000, child support errors above $2,500, certain criminal convictions, national security concerns, and fraud in the application process. Each of these reasons operates through different legal mechanisms, each affects different populations, and each requires different responses from people who find themselves at risk. But here is what I need you to understand as we bring this conversation to a close. Knowing these 5 reasons is not about living in fear. It is about living with awareness. It is about understanding that the passport in your drawer, the one you probably take for granted, represents a privilege that comes with responsibilities. When you meet those responsibilities, when you pay your taxes, support your children, obey the law, avoid associations with terrorist organizations, and tell the truth on your applications, your passport remains secure. The system is not designed to trap honest people. It is designed to enforce accountability and protect national interests. Let me offer you some perspective that often gets lost in conversations like this one. Millions of Americans travel internationally every single year without any passport problems whatsoever. They renew their documents routinely. They pass through customs without incident. They enjoy the freedom that American citizenship provides. The revocation cases, while serious, represent a tiny fraction of passport holders. If you have been watching this video with growing anxiety, wondering whether something in your past might come back to haunt you, take a breath. For most people, these 5 reasons will never become personal realities. They are theoretical risks, not imminent threats. However, if anything I discussed today did resonate with your situation, if you recognized yourself in the descriptions of tax debt, child support errors, legal troubles, or documentation concerns, then this video has served its purpose. You now have information you did not have before. You understand the mechanisms that could affect your travel freedom, and most importantly, you have the opportunity to take action before a problem becomes a crisis. Address the tax debt before it reaches the threshold. Catch up on child support before you need to renew your passport. Consult with an attorney if you have concerns about your legal history or documentation. The time to solve these problems is now, not when you are standing at an airline counter with a boarding pass in your hand and a denied passport in the system. I also want to remind you that circumstances change and laws evolve. The thresholds I mentioned today, the enforcement mechanisms I described, these can be modified by Congress or by policy changes within federal agencies. Staying informed is an ongoing responsibility, not a one-time event. Bookmark reliable sources. Pay attention to changes in passport regulations. And never assume that what was true 5 years ago remains true today. Your passport represents freedom. It represents opportunity. It represents your ability to experience the world beyond American borders and return home safely. That document is worth protecting, and protecting it starts with understanding. You now have that understanding. What you do with it is up to you. If this information helped you see your situation more clearly, if it motivated you to address something you have been avoiding, or if it simply gave you peace of mind knowing that none of these reasons apply to your life, then we accomplished something valuable together today. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. The awareness that protects you can protect them too. Take care of yourself. Take care of your responsibilities, and your passport will take care of